Alright, welcome back. It's finally that time. We're going to be talking today about destroyers, specifically destroyers in 2.1 and how they function, what their role is, what sort of outfits you have for them, etc. So, first of all, destroyer, let's boil this down to its absolute basics. Starts out the game as a frontline ship with a little bit of mixed point defense in there, if needed, at least if there's a missile enemy, then swiftly moving into an anti-destroyer platform, and then it basically becomes a dedicated anti-air platform within the context of everything. But the destroyer by itself is arguably a lot better than the cruiser at all of these roles. So let's go and dive into some of the items that are available for the destroyer and what kind of ship designs you should be looking at. So first of all, let's take a look at the most basic design, the Corvette Basher, as I like to call it. You will generally unlock this extremely early within the game and is basically your initial mainstay. Now, one thing that is very important to keep in the back of your head. Once the quote-unquote Corvette Basher comes onto the field, it doesn't need all that much evasion. It will have a reasonable amount of shields. It will have a reasonable amount of armor. So instead of going for a picket approach where it has a improved fire rate and improved tracking, having an improved fire rate and weapon range is generally a little bit better. So having a artillery combat computer is generally quite nice. Now you can mix this up if you want to and put in the line computer in here just to get a little bit higher chance to hit, which is pretty fine, especially versus Corvettes. It's kind of nice, especially if they have a very high evasion. It looks a little bit like this. It's mostly smalls and mediums and is basically designed to swap Corvettes out of the sky. Afterburners are not always necessary. You can be a little bit creative and put an auxiliary fire control on there just to have a little bit more of a chance to hit modifier on there. Again, medium weapons don't necessarily work very well versus Corvettes. And of course, the layout on the top here does not necessarily reflect your situation. Always find out what the enemy has and how to counter them properly, whether it's kinetic or laser weapons. Let's go and take a look at the early game support ship. The early game support ship is, once again, relatively straightforward and is basically the same as the Corvette Basher, as we already discussed earlier. Basically, this bad boy is completely designed to whack missiles out of the sky as much as possible. That means that its picket setup is rather important because of the fire rate bonus that we get with that. Basically, you want to be able to shoot missiles as fast as possible. Of course, the a chance to hit modifier does help quite a lot as well. Very important if you're going up against pirates early game. Maybe you gotta put a tier 2 power plant in there or something along those lines. Or instead, maybe, let's take a look here. Put a tier 2 armor in there and then you can just squeeze it down. You always want to keep the power to a minimal amount. The modifier for improved weapon damage due to overpowering your weapons is not all that much. You generally want to keep your costs down, so the less usage it has of power, the better, because if I put a larger energy modifier on here, it become 10 minerals more expensive. Now, especially in the start of the game, when this particular type of ship rolls out, 10 minerals is a lot, so please keep that in the back of your mind. Let's talk about the pre-cruiser ship of the line. This is before cruisers come into the game, and they are still giant garbage piles, but that does not mean that you should not be ready for them. This bad boy is completely designed to take out enemy destroyers and maybe some very early cruisers. Again, mediums and smalls specifically against corvettes, and the mediums against other destroyers. Once again, with the basic combat computer on this one, just for additional tracking bonus. If you want to be a little bit more cheeky, you can also put the artillery on there for the additional range. You can ignore all this stuff on the left here for now. That's only applicable to your particular situation. But you always want to keep your eye on thrusters or at least your thrusters, high as possible just because of that evasion modifier. Keep an eye on this, by the way. Evasion 40.4. Welcome to the mid-game Bruiser. The mid-game Bruiser is a fast response, anti-cruiser, anti-battleship platform. Is it any good? No, it really isn't. It's basically a giant pile of garbage. The only thing it's got going for it is the large launcher on the front of the ship. This can basically be anything. So, for instance, we can put a kinetic cannon on there just for the range bonus. We can put a neutron launcher on there. This is only particularly useful if you're going up against large singular targets that have a difficulty tracking enemies. So basically, you want to keep your evasion as high as possible, which is why we put an advanced afterburner onto this boy. At this point, you probably have plasma thrusters, so increase that to 51%, which is great. We definitely want to put an advanced combat computer on there for the... Actually, no, that is the tracking one. My apologies. I'm pretty sure there was one that did evasion as well. It's actually the Sapient combat computer. My apologies. But if you can get one, that's great, because then your... evasion goes up even more, and it allows you to stay on the field for even longer. The real question is, what kind of additional behavior do you want to attach to the ship? Considering it has torpedoes, do you want to stay in range due to its engagement range being 130? Maybe you want to put something, maybe even keep this one empty and keep a artillery modifier on here instead, just to keep that weapon range up and they don't, close in on the enemy. That's another question. Would you build this a lot? No, not really. It's not particularly great. It's potentially good in large swarms versus large targets like stations or Leviathans that have difficulty tracking, but still, it's an interesting design. Let's go to the late game support ship. This is where the ship design absolutely shines. This is probably one of my favorite support ships that you can build within the game. I can even put a tier 4 on there. Oh, that's nice. But yeah, let's crank it up. So this is the late game support ship. A lot of point defense. You can always swap these in and out depending on what you're going against. Versus Fallen Empires, this is particularly great because they do like to use quite a lot of fighter craft, so you want to keep that in mind. But overall, pretty decent. Again, the advanced afterburners in the late game, incredibly useful due to their evasion modifier. It's slowly going up, almost to the point where they are gigantic corvettes, which is kind of cool. Then let's take a look at the Boss Man, the high-end late-game ship. By the way, the late-game support, this is at the end of the game, this is basically the only thing you'll be using. But yeah, here it is, the high-end late-game support ship. This thing is insane for various reasons, mainly because of this. The enigmatic encoder. Now, the chance of you getting the enigmatic encoder is relatively low. You need to roll correctly on the enigmatic fortress, which the chances of are relatively low, but it does give you a 20% evasion modifier, so almost up to 70% evasion on this bad boy, which is pretty incredible. We can put some jump drives on there, some dark matter thrusters for even more evasion. The Sapient combat computer is great for additional evasion. Sadly, the precognitive interface does not have that. So you can't really mix and match side jump drive and Sapient combat computer, but you get the general idea here. Yeah, due to its high evasion, it means it can stay on the field for a significantly longer time and take down enemy missiles, enemy strike craft for pretty much forever. All whilst at the same time flanking your, or at least covering your battleships and other corvettes on the field so that you can basically take advantage of the situation and shoot down the enemy before they can take down your main damage dealers, which is what this is not. This is definitely a dedicated support craft for the end game, which in my personal feelings is pretty much the only role that it has in the end game. Now you can of course always mix and match, try to mess around with some of the bows and the sterns and whatnot, but I feel this is relatively optimal in this particular scenario. Yeah, you can even lower this down. You don't need a dark matter reactor on there. Yeah, side jump drive. Hell, if you don't have access to all of this stuff, it doesn't really matter. You can still mix and match and make this work for you. Regardless, destroyers. Yeah, so let's recap. Destroyers are absolutely excellent in the support category, mainly because of their super high evasion and their ability to strap a relatively large amount of anti-aircraft and flak onto them. And yeah, they do this quite a lot better than cruisers because cruisers are basically a giant target flying around in space. Destroyers. Good early game, especially as ship alliance, and absolutely excellent in the super late game, where they are the de facto #1 support craft. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to wrap it up here. If you like this episode, leave a comment below. We'll wrap up this series with the cruiser and battleships very soon, as soon as I have internet at home. But in the meantime, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, take good care of yourselves. And as always, each other.